my Kenvians, PapaKen here, and welcome to a brand new episode of Discovering Torchwood. Last time, as you know, I did my reaction for Countrycide, and this time I'm going to be doing the review, finally. So, let's get right into it with my favorite parts about this episode. Now, the number of them might surprise you after you saw the reaction, but bear with me here. Starting with just the clever and intense intro. Now, I mean, for a lot of shows like this, they always go with a very intense introduction because they want to grab you right then and there. But pretty much everything about the intro for this episode works so well, including the fact that you can't tell, I mean, it's Torchwood. We expect something supernatural. So, even when the girl gets attacked in the car, I'm pretty sure I audibly said in the video, I couldn't tell, was that a person maybe? Or was that an alien? Because we couldn't see the face. So just, the introduction for this episode was just a perfect setup for what this episode ended up becoming. Moving on from there, my second favorite part of this episode is Owen's just hatred, just as pure hatred of the countryside, or being out in the country. It just, they play it up really well, and it's not just a one-time joke in the very beginning. They have those jokes continue, not continuously, but they do have them spread out through the episode, all the way up until, what is it, the last 5 minutes probably of the episode. I love the fact that they did that they didn't just have him change his mind or stop bad-mouthing the countryside. It's just like they get taken captive and there's cannibals and he's like, of course, out in the country. I just love that. Moving on, my next favorite part of this episode, and I mentioned this several times in the reaction video, but just the way this episode captures that horror movie, more specifically slasher horror movie feel. They do an excellent job of that in this episode, so much so that honestly it has me hoping that we might have another like it in the future as far as Torchwood goes. Now, those of you that have seen the whole show know whether or not that actually happens, but it's just done so well. The guy that wrote this episode, I am blanking on his name, but he did a really good job with that. And then the directing on this episode, for the most part, was just really spot on. Although, even though I say for the most part, even the parts that don't work, strangely do work if you look at this episode as a B horror movie. And if you're not sure what a B horror movie is, it's basically, imagine the original Resident Evil game and the intro cinematics and any of the dialogue in the original games. That's basically B horror movie acting. But alright, moving on. My next favorite part of this episode was when Jack found the guy down in the basement that he had shot, and he becomes just what I call Jack the Interrogator. He was very much calling out, well, I want to say he calls out, his Dean side, but I don't even know if Supernatural had started, or if that part of Supernatural had started by the time this episode actually came around. But for those of you that don't know, there's something happens in Supernatural, and one of the main characters, Dean, goes through some things that end up making him also very good at interrogations through advanced means, shall we say. So yeah, just the intensity that Jack portrayed through that entire scene is just so good. So yeah, that was just a really good scene. As slightly terrifying as it was with Jack, but overall, just thumbs up. Moving on from there, my next favorite part of this episode is the fact that there's nothing supernatural about what's going on in this episode. And again, it's just pulling a complete 180 on what you expect from this show in general, and what the characters expect. It's like they keep asking, does the rift go out this far? Well, what kind of aliens are these? Gwen was saying, this isn't human. Humans couldn't do this. But in the end, it ends up being just these psychotic people, these cannibals that do this generational thing, as terrifying of a thought as that is. And just the idea that none of this was supernatural. All of this was technically, it could be something that could happen. Hopefully not. But it's actually kind of terrifying knowing that would actually be a possibility of sorts. Okay, so moving on from that thought, my final favorite part of this episode is the main killer. I believe his name is Ewan? E-W-A-N Sherman. Ewan Sherman. I don't know how to pronounce it, but just the guy that plays him, Owen Teal, if that man has not played like serial killers or others of the like in other shows or even movies, someone's missing out on a huge calling for this guy, because he was legitimately terrifying. I mean, creepy. So creepy. With the licking, how he licked his tongue across his teeth and his lips, and just his movements, and just pure psychotic behavior. And also, what I'm pretty sure is, one of the quotes of the episode, you probably know what it is. I would probably actually have to say that right alongside the horror movie, or the horror slasher movie feel of the entire episode, that Ewan was probably the best part of this episode. It actually gives me chills thinking about that. But okay, moving on from there, it is time for some of my annoyances. And a few of these I felt kind of bad in a way for saying that they're annoyances, but again, it's just my personal feelings, both while I was watching it for the reaction and then upon a rewatch as well. My first annoyance is Ianto pining over Lisa. Now, it probably hasn't been that long of a period of time since Cyberwoman occurred, so she is still on his mind. But, it's already awkward enough with the secrets that are being revealed as far as who has snogged who. But then Ianto is just like, the last person... There's a moth in here. Get out of here. Anyway, the last person I snogged was Lisa. And it's... It's like, on one hand, yes, I get it. He loved her, he kind of just lost her. But at the same time, it's just like, really? Do you... I don't know. It just felt childish and overly dramatic to me. It goes along with the horror movie theme, I guess. But yeah, that was one big annoyance for me. But not as big as this next one. My second annoyance with this episode is Owen. Just in general. The narcissistic, overly sexually aggressive Owen. And don't get me wrong, I get it that Gwen was reacting, I guess you would say, positively to his advances there, but just that entire little scene in the woods, just, it made me incredibly uncomfortable, and just made me, I mean, honestly, it made me perceive Owen as a possible rapist. I know that's very strong language to use, and I apologize if that offends anyone, but it's just, that's like the image in my mind that I got when he was doing that to her. It's just like, you know, like he was forcing himself on her. So yeah, I was not a fan of that scene. Other parts of the episode helped me get away from that, but still that one scene lingered on my mind for a while, and especially after I watched the episode the second time. But okay, moving on from there, my third annoyance is Ianto again. And it kind of harkens to the whole, you know, B-movie, cheesy horror movie argument that I was making earlier. And it's when he's sort of like criticizing Tosh for getting a rush out of being in danger and trying to get out of it. And she says, "We do this to protect people." And Ianto, very overly dramatically, like easily the most overly dramatic line of the show so far, in my opinion. "Then who protects us?" I think I over-exaggerated that even, but "Then who protects us?" It just, I don't know, just something about Ianto in this episode really, really bothered me. Almost like if he hadn't been there, maybe things wouldn't have been so bad. I don't know. But then again, Tosh needed some backup. So, yeah, I don't know. But, yeah, that's two annoyances against Ianto, unfortunately. But, yeah, hopefully that changes in the future. I don't know. But moving on, my fourth annoyance with this episode is the line, and I think I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but it's from the woman when she comes in to collect them. When she says, "Every 10 years, it takes us again, the harvest." And obviously we find out what the harvest is later, but I don't know if maybe they had been spying in on them, or if they learned something about Tosh and Ianto, but it seemed almost too easy that, or I can't think of the right word, but she was playing along with this idea that it's other people in control, regardless of whether it's aliens or not, but it's other people, and she has nothing to do with it, which I don't understand the point of, if she's one of them anyway. I mean, she has a friggin' shotgun, but then again, she was being pounced upon at the beginning, but yeah, I don't know, just something about that line and that scene just really bothers me about, I don't know, something about the logic seems inconsistent, or maybe I'm overthinking it and it makes perfect sense. It's entirely possible. But my fifth and final annoyance with this episode is that Gwen doesn't shoot. Like the fake cop, or maybe he's a real cop, but the guy has the gun, a gun aimed at Owen, who has a gun aimed at Ewan, and Gwen has a gun on this guy who is going to shoot Owen. And in a situation like that, I understand that, you know, you want to de-escalate, obviously. However, there are people being mutilated and murdered here. It is clear that the guy on the ground is a bad person, a very bad person, was just choking out Tosh, nearly killed her by choking her to death. he's clearly not mentally stable. And then this other guy pulls a gun on Owen because he's in on it. And yes, there is a risk that the officer could have shot Owen. However, Gwen and Owen have guns. So that's 2 guns against 1. So you take out the bad guy with the gun. I don't know. And I mean, that may be just, me being American and, me being a gun owner. That sort of logic enters my head, but it makes no sense to me that you would not take that opportunity to save your friend, prevent yourself and possibly others from being murdered. Now, again, it does work out in the end when Jack drives a friggin' tractor through the door and saves them all, just as Ianto is about to get his neck slit open. But yeah, that's such a big annoyance of mine. Both times I watched it. First time, again, visible reaction to when it happens, but watching it the second time, I was just, did a face palm, or a hand face palm, whatever it is, yeah. And that just really drives me crazy. But before I move on, you might notice that a certain scene was not mentioned, such as an ending scene. And I will actually touch on that near the end of the video, in case you're wondering. And obviously I didn't put it into the favorites or annoyances because it doesn't really fall into either one. And who knows, maybe you'll agree with me when this is all over. But moving on from there, my question of the episode is rather simple and honestly not in context of the episode for the most part. But is it normal for a random food truck just be out there in the middle of nowhere, out there in the middle of the country where there seem to be no nearby buildings, no nearby cities, or anything like that? Like, is that just normal out in the UK? Because I don't feel like it is. Now here in the US, we have, tiny pit stops along roads, and, we'll have like little sections with little dives off the road. But you don't really have just a food truck just there in the middle of nowhere. That disappears later, from what I can tell. So yeah, that's my question. Is it normal? Is that a common thing for just a food truck to be out there in the middle of nowhere? Please let me know, friends in the UK and elsewhere, for that matter. But okay, moving on from there, no track of the episode, but just, I would have to say the overall creepy tracks that played over this entire episode, it played into that horror movie feel. Even before it started to really feel like a horror movie, like the music made it feel so appropriate. It just really worked. Strangely, the only song that felt out of place in this episode was the theme song. I'm not saying the theme song was bad, because I really enjoy it, but among all the other music, just this, creeping horror, it feels out of place. So again, that's just me, but the soundtrack for the episode overall just really worked. But moving on from there, I do have 2 quotes of the episodes, one of which is kind of incidental, but one that just really hit me hard. And the first one is actually from Jack, while Owen is complaining about having to camp out because he hates the countryside, and Jack says, "No other race in the universe goes camping. Celebrate your uniqueness." Or was it embrace your uniqueness? I might have written that down wrong, but one way or the other, I really liked that quote just because of it's kind of an interesting concept to think that maybe, no other race in the universe does go camping. I would find that really hard to believe, to be completely honest, but who knows? It's entirely possible, I guess. But okay, and then my last quote of the episode comes from Ewan Sherman, and it's his last line before Jack takes him away. And he leans close to Gwen and says, "'Cause it made me happy." Friggin' terrifying. And it's this is easily the darkest episode of Torchwood so far. I mean, I'm sure it's going to get pretty dark at certain points, but just as far as like human psychology goes, and like trying to wrap your mind around what could drive people to do that, not just for generations, but on a personal level. And the answer for this guy is because it made him happy. Gah. Yeah, that's like all I have to say about that. But before moving on, as always, everyone, if you have any of your own favorites, your own annoyances with the episode, some of your own favorite tracks maybe, but especially quotes, please do let me know what they are in the comments down below. Now it's time for my theory and also my thoughts on a certain subject. My theory is that the Gwen and Owen relationship, which is not a secret among the Torchwood people, or maybe it is. They know that they snogged. I don't know whether or not they'll know that they hook up, but I have a feeling that if it does become known on the team, it's going to cause a rift. Whether or not it comes out to Reese that he learns about this, that'll definitely cause a rift. But that's my theory on it. Now, as for my thoughts on the subject, when I saw the ending of the episode, you all could clearly see I was left a bit speechless, taken aback to say the least, and a bit disgusted because of, one, what happened with Owen earlier in the episode, and two, because Gwen is betraying Reese. She's betraying the man she loves. That being said, when I took time to think about this, and upon second viewing, while I do not agree with what the character does, I still don't particularly care for Owen. But even though I don't agree with what she does, I can understand why. And let me explain here. It can be in any profession, no matter what you do, but when you work closely with people and you spend a lot of time with them, you grow an attachment to those people. And it's an aspect of a relationship you might not, and a lot of people just don't have, with their spouses or with their significant others. And whenever you have that connection, especially when something involving that connection or concerning that connection causes you some trauma, or causes something that you literally can't explain to the person you love, that you can't just open up and say what happened, like, oh, I got shot by a shotgun and nearly got murdered by cannibals. Like, that stuff that she has to keep secret from Reese. Just emotionally, it can cause a person to reach out to someone who can relate, to someone who can someone who is able to share those feelings, to someone who is able to understand. And in this case, that is someone like Owen, who they do share, feelings. Even though the first time they kissed, it was because they thought they were going to die. I think what I'm trying to say, I'll try and give the short version of it right now, is that I do not at all agree with what she did. At all. If, something like that happened with me and my wife, I would be incredibly upset. That would cause some major issues with our relationship, to say the least. But as far as being able to understand why it happened, why she gave in to that temptation, why it was Owen, it's understandable. So, yeah. I get it. I don't like it, but I get it. So, I don't know if that's what you all were expecting to hear from me regarding that, but those are honestly my thoughts. I'm not saying that, again, if Reese finds out about it, that he should forgive her, not at all. But as an outsider looking in, I can understand. I can understand how that could happen. So, but yeah, moving on from there, if you all have any of your own thoughts about that situation, which I'm sure there will be, please feel free to leave those in the comments down below, and also leave some of your thoughts about what I had to say about it. I'm interested to see what kind of feedback you have for me in that regard. But as for my overall thoughts on this episode, it was really good. I don't know if it'll end up being a favorite of mine, but just for how stark of a contrast it had from the other episodes that came before it, and the fact that it, again, lacked any actual supernatural substance, unless you count Jack, it was really well done and really good. And like I said earlier in the episode, it has me wanting another one like it. Hopefully a little bit less traumatizing, and hopefully without, cheating at the end. But just something like it. Something that can effectively use human nature, or some of the darker sides of human nature, and bring it to the forefront in a way that makes it seem like it could be something supernatural going on. So that's all I have to say about that episode. Everyone, thank you so much for joining me for episode 6 of Discovering Torchwood, covering Countryside. And next time we have Greeks Bearing Gifts, which is an interesting title for an episode, but based on the little snippet of the preview I saw, looks like it could be pretty interesting. But alright everyone, until next time, I'm Papa Ken, and Alonzi!